Welcome back to the channel, and for today's video, we're going to go over one question. Is it possible to be a poker professional at the 1-3 level? I did a small little case study where I played 5 straight sessions, which I've never done in my life, and in the end, I'll go over my results and see, in fact, if it is possible to be a 1-3 poker pro. Let's find out. For all 5 of these sessions, we're playing at the one and only Capital Casino in the heart of Sacramento, and each time we buy in for our usual $500. We're about 30 minutes into session 1, and after winning a couple small, uneventful pots, we're up about $100 on the day. The $6 straddle is on in this hand, and I look down at pocket jacks. 3 people call the $6, and since I'm out of position, I raise the price of poker to $38. And as we all know, no one is ever folding at Capital Casino once one person calls, so we're going 4 ways to a flop out of position with the one hand in poker that I have no clue how to play. Fun. With about $150 in the middle, the dealer throws out a 10-7-4 all-club board. I'm first to act and honestly have zero clue what to do. I mean, I do have an overpair, and I have the jack of clubs as backup, so I think a bet is in order. I throw out a small $55 feeler bet for value, I think, and only one of the early position limpers calls. I think I went small enough to where any 10, 8, 9, and obviously any hand with the ace of clubs is continuing, so I think there's a good chance we still have the best hand. With $260 in the middle, the turn comes out the 8 of diamonds, giving us a gut shot to go along with our overpair and backup flush draw with the jack of clubs. Our opponent only has about a half pot bet remaining in his stack, so I think there's only one move to do, which is all in. Well, our opponent calls faster than I could put out my chips in the middle.
It was at this moment that he knew. He f***ed up.
I reluctantly turn over my hand, and our opponent turns over ace-3 of clubs for the nuts, and I double up our opponent with the one hand I have no clue how to play. We add on $200 to our stack to get some of that lost money back on the table, so we're into the game for $700 total. There's 2 limps in early position, and we are blessed with pocket jacks for a second time and just as many orbits. I raise them to $15 and get even more callers than the last time, so now we're going 6 ways to a flop with the one hand I have zero clue how to play. The flop comes out 10-9-4 with 2 diamonds, and once again we have an overpair. The action gets checked to me, and I'm going to stick with the strategy of betting small in a multi-way pot with value and see what happens. So I bet just $35 into a pot of 90 and get a call from the button and early position limper. They have about $150 remaining in their stacks, so I think if they had me beat, they would have just shipped their chips in the middle, so I think I'm ahead at the moment. I think. But not anymore when the turn comes out the 8 of clubs. Even though this card does give me an open-ender, I personally don't see a point in betting. I think one of these opponents has a flush draw, but it's very unlikely that both of them do, so this card had to have improved one of them to either 2 pair or a weird straight. So when the early position player checks, I check to realize my equity, and thankfully, the button checks it back. So I think the button is probably the one with the flush draw since he didn't bet last to act. We're still going 3 ways to a river, which comes out the queen of spades, giving us the straight. The early position limper checks for a 3rd time, and now the action is on me. Our opponents have about a pot size bet remaining, and I don't know what sizing I should use. I think there's 2 viable options: jam and polarize myself, or bet small and hope to get looked up light. I go with the latter and bet just $55. The button folds right away, so he's very likely the one to have the flush draw, and now the early position limper goes in the tank. He's talking about how he doesn't love his hand, but he doesn't think he could fold it, which is music to our ears. He eventually sticks in the call, and I show my hand, and it's good against what I assume is 2 pair. We finally win a pot with this tricky hand.
Yeah, they had us the first half, I'm not going to lie. They had us. We weren't defeated, but they had us.
Yeah, good, man.
They might have that.
Yeah,
No more early. That's good.
last time he's dead on the flop.
That's the queen.
In this next hand, we get dealt the bullets, pocket aces, and I'm absolutely hating life right now. If you're asking what the hell is wrong with me, then I don't blame you. But what I didn't show you is that we're playing in a 9-way $15 bomb pot, and if I didn't know how to play pocket jacks, then I sure don't know how the hell to play pocket aces in a bomb pot. Well, there's only one way to find out. With $130 in the middle, we're going straight to a flop 9 ways, and the dealer puts out a 5-4-4 rainbow board. The action gets checked to me in middle position, and I throw out a $40 feeler bet to test the waters. Only the hijack puts in the call, so we're going heads up out of position against an opponent that could have any 2 cards. With $210 in the middle, the turn comes out the 6 of hearts, and this card seems like it's better for his range, I think. So I start off with the check for some pot control, and our opponent decides to bet $75. For that price, there's nowhere I'm going yet, so I stick in the call, and the pot has ballooned to $360. The river comes out another 6, but in the club variety, and I check again. Our opponent goes in a mini tank, but decides to check it back, which we love to see. I turn over my hand pretty confidently, but our opponent turns over 4 deuce offsuit for a full house. We got moved to the main game and nothing too noteworthy happened. We did manage to win a nice little $200 pot with pocket queens and a nice $90 pot with pocket tens against ace queen that got checked down. I'll save you guys some valuable time by not having to watch me grind through 5 outros in one vlog, so let's run the results for day 1 as a professional poker player. We played for 4 hours and 40 minutes and profited $146. It was a pretty standard result that will take any day of the week and twice on Sunday, so let's see what day 2 has in store. No straddle is on for this next hand, and we see an early position player limp. A solid player in middle position raises to $15, and it gets folded to me in the cutoff, and I look down at 8-6 of clubs. The button seems disinterested in this hand, so I decide to put in the questionable call, knowing I'll have position on everyone. But when you play trash like this, you definitely have to use extreme caution, or else.
The more you around, the more you're going to find out. And also, if you stay down here and you never around, you'll never find out.
The big blind and limper put in the call, so with $60 in the middle, we're going to an ace-8-6 board with 2 spades and a club, giving us bottom 2 pair and a backdoor flush draw. The early position limper donks for $25, and the original raiser puts in the call. I think this is a mandatory spot to raise, so I bump it up to exactly $100 in position. I was expecting to get maybe one of them to call, but to my surprise, they both do. The pot has quickly ballooned to $360 in the middle, and the turn comes out the 4 of hearts, bringing in the obvious open-ender of 7-5. Luckily, both players check to me, and since I have pretty much exactly a pot-sized bet left with a very vulnerable hand, I'm fully committed and jam all in. If you have 7-5 or ran into ace-4, then good for you. But I don't think that's the case because in the end, both players decide on a fold, and we take down a nice pot with a very questionable hand.
Gotta let them know.
The hijack opens this hand up to $21, and the action gets folded to me in the big blind. I look down at pocket 7s and decide to put in the call. We're going heads up out of position to a flop, which comes out queen 7 deuce with 2 clubs giving us middle set. I do something I've honestly never done before and lead out with the set for $15. Our opponent is a solid player who knows my game pretty well. I think against thinking players, I have to mix in some unorthodox lines to balance myself, and this definitely qualifies as one of them. He puts in the $15, and the turn comes out the 2 of hearts, giving us a full house. I keep the aggression going and now bet $55. He calls pretty quickly once again, so I think he's capped at a flush draw, queen X, or an overpair at this point. So with $180 in the pot, we go to a river, which comes out the 5 of clubs, bringing in the front door flush. My exact live thoughts were if he has a flush, he's never folding to a bet, and if he has an overpair or a hand like Queen X, and I bet, then he's probably wondering why I'm betting when the flush gets there. So with that being said, I decided to bomb it and make it $200 even. Our opponent doesn't snap call, so I don't think the flush is likely. Now I'm kind of kicking myself for betting too big and giving him room to overfold his good hands. But luckily, it doesn't come to that because our opponent puts in the call. I turn over my full house and he flashes me the queen of clubs. I don't blame him for making the call because my line was very bizarre and he had a flush blocker as well.
I'm gonna hold on to this. Okay. Thank you.
I had a little cheat day and was forced to play a short session, which is not what poker professionals do, but I had a good excuse. I was able to close on my dream house and get that stress off of my back. Okay, this might not be the exact house, or anything even close to it since this is Denzel Washington's mansion, but you get the picture. We only played 2 hours today, but we were able to bag a solid $392 profit. Things are going smooth so far this week, so let's try to keep the momentum going into day 3. Day 3 started off with a very interesting hand right off the bat. There's an early position limp, and an older gentleman makes it $12 in middle position. The cutoff calls, and when I look down at 40% of a royal flush on the button, I stick in the call as well. We get 2 more callers in the small blind and limper, so we're going 5 ways to a flop with $60 in the middle, and we see an ace-jack-4 2-diamond board giving us a royal flush draw. The older gentleman continues the betting for $35, and it gets folded to me. Old me would just say screw it and put in a massive raise to try and get all the money in, but when an old man or woman over the age of 70 raises pre-flop, then continues betting into 4 people on an ace-high board, I'm 99% certain that they have something very good that they're never folding. So with that being said, I just stick in the call and everyone else folds. With $130 in the middle, the turn comes out the ace of spades, putting 2 aces on the board. Our opponent doesn't take too long before grabbing a stack out of his rack and betting $100 even. I just audibly laugh out loud because at worst he has a hand like ace-10, and for this price, I don't think I could continue regardless of how bad I want to. So I fold and our opponent shows ace-jack of hearts for a turn full house, and we just had 1 out to win the hand. There's a time and place to get the money all in on a board like this, but this was definitely not one of them. Spots like this will help save your hourly win rate in the long run. This next hand is very interesting, strictly based off the fact that I'm playing in 2 different seats at once because I'm waiting for a player to move tables and seat change to get a better view for the vlog, while also trying to play out the rack. I mean, what could go wrong? So there's 1 early position limp, and I raise pocket 9s to $15 on the hijack. The cutoff, button, and limper all call, so we're going 4 ways to a flop, which comes out 9-7-5 with 2 spades, giving us top set. The limper checks to me, and I don't see a point in slow playing this on such a connected board, so I bet $35 and just the button puts in the call. This is the same player from the last hand who had ace-jack of hearts, so keep that in mind. The turn comes out the jack of clubs, putting 2 flush draws on the board and bringing in 10-8 for the straight. But there's no way I'm slowing down the betting. I decide to continue the aggression, but for $80 this time. Our opponent doesn't take too long before sticking in the call again. So with $290 in the middle, the river comes out the 3 of clubs, bringing in the backdoor flush. I decide to keep up the pressure and bet $150, targeting 2 pairs or hands like Jack 10. But unfortunately, our opponent folds pretty quick, but we take down a solid pot. I ended up table changing to an action-packed lineup, but I couldn't hit jack shit. The $10 straddle was on pretty often, and I added on $100 at one point, and soon afterward added on another $200, so we're into the game for $800 total. The $6 straddle is on for this hand, and an action player opens to $25 in early position. Another early position player, the cutoff, and button all call, And when I look down at pocket 6 in the small blind, I toss in the $25 as well. The straddler also puts in the money, so we're going 6 ways to a flop with $150 already in the middle, and it comes out Jack 6-4 with 2 clubs, giving us middle set. I could definitely donk here, but given the action-packed lineup and aggressive players involved in the hand, I decide to start off with a check. The early position opener c-bets for $100, and surprisingly, both the cutoff and button put in the call. I'm in a dream spot with $625 left in my stack. There's already $450 in the pot, so I could probably jam, but I honestly want to see if we could get some callers. So I raised the price of poker to $275, and the early position raiser says out loud, "If you got it, you got it," and jams his remaining stack of 420 total. The other 2 players get out of the way, and I obviously snap call. My live thoughts were he either has an overpair, flush draw, or the occasional 7-5 suited. I turn over my hand like I always do when I'm all in, but the other player decides to not show, so let's go to a run out. The turn comes out the 2 of diamonds, so I should still have the best hand, but the river is the 8 of clubs, bringing in the front door flush and giving 7-5 the straight. Luckily, our opponent had neither of those and chose ace-jack offsuit with the ace of clubs, and we had him drawing dead on the turn. Our patience of not forcing the issue this session, even though we were card dead, pays off massively, and we scoop in a huge pot. Unfortunately, this was the only noteworthy hand we really played at this table, which sucks because it was such a good lineup. So as for our day 3 results, we played a total of 4 hours and profited $336 to start a 3-session winning streak and adding to the profits. Let's keep it rolling for day 4. The first interesting hand of day 4 comes about an hour in. We're cruising along the session and we're up about $50 at this point when we get dealt ace-8 of diamonds under the gun. The table has been super call heavy, so when I get a hand that can make the nuts, I try to get involved. I start off with a limp, and 5 more people join the limp fest, so we're going 6 ways to a flop of ace-9-9 with 2 clubs and 1 diamond. The big blind checks, I check, and the action gets checked to the button, who bets $20. It gets folded back to me, and I decide to float with a decent ace and a backdoor flush draw. Everyone else folds, so we're going heads up to a turn with $53 in the middle, and the turn comes out the amazing ace of spades, giving us a full house. I decide to check again to see what our opponent does, and he now down bets to $15. This sizing definitely seems like a 9x hand that wants to bet the turn and check back the river. So I decide to call again and see a river, which comes out the queen of spades. I decide now to lead out for $20, so he's forced to call with the 9 for that sizing, but now our opponent raises to $200. I just audibly laugh out loud because I'm like, there's just no way he could limp pocket 9s or ace-queen on the button, right? So even though I'm calling for a chop, I'm not going to let this guy push me around like I'm some sort of punk, so I stick in the call and he shows me ace-queen offsuit for top full house, and I'm more upset than this lady was after finding out Don became president over Hillary. Not gonna lie, I was pretty mad at myself for making this call, and my tilt radar was firing. But all we could do is move on, so I add on $300 to get more chips on the table, and we're now into the game for $800 total. The live 6 is on for this hand, and under the gun opens to $20 off a short stack. The action gets folded to me in the big blind, and I look down at the ladies, pocket queens, and raise them up to $48. The straddler folds, and the short stack jams all in for $108 total. I obviously snap call and turn over my hand right away, but he doesn't want to show his yet. So we're going to a run out, and the flop comes out pretty good of 10-6-5 rainbow. The turn is the king of spades, which I'm not loving, and the river is the jack of clubs, and our opponent immediately turns over his hand and shows jack 10 of hearts for the winner and scooping in a decent little pot. Can't be mad, especially going up against our favorite hand.
That doesn't make any sense.
I would have liked it.
It's like rooting for men.
Just a couple orbits later, I open pocket tens to $15 in the low jack. The hijack puts in the call, and now the same player who sucked out with jack 10 against our pocket queens decides to go all in. I ask the dealer for a count, and the total comes out to $163. I don't know about you guys, but whenever I see a jam like this over a $15 bet, it's either a pair like 8s through 10s, maybe pocket jacks, or definitely a hand like ace-king. So with that being said, I need all the protection I could get if I want to win this pot, so I re-jam and the hijack gets out of there. He folds king-queen of diamonds face up, which I'm super happy with because the button decides to show pre-flop this time and shows ace-queen offsuit. So we're flipping for a $340 pot, but one of his queen outs is gone. We see a nice looking flop of 6-5-5 rainbow, a beautiful 3 of clubs turn, but we see the horrific ace of clubs on the river.
This is getting so sick. What in the world is going on? Are you kidding me?
That was a no.
You gotta be just kidding me.
There's nothing we could really do but just tip our cap because this guy has our number. After those gross 3 hands, we added on some more chips throughout the session, but literally just went card dead for the next 2.5 hours. So day 4 was just a complete dud. But as for results, we played exactly 4 hours and booked a hefty loss of $716. We only have 1 day left in this little case study, so I need to make the best of it. Let's see how we bounce back. Things get started right away for day 5. There's 2 limps to me, and I look down at ace-queen offsuit in the low jack. I raise it to $18, and the big blind and both limpers decide to put in the call. With about $70 in the middle, the flop comes out queen 5-4 with 2 spades, giving us top pair, top kicker. They all check to me, and I decide to bet $40 on such a connected flop, and we see the big blind and one of the early position limpers put in the call. I can't put them on a range yet, but there's definitely some cards in the deck that I don't want to see, but the 4 of clubs is not one of those because it pairs the board and brings in the backdoor flush draw. This is a perfect card to get value with because even more draws are available, so when they check to me for a second time, I decide to size up and bet $110 to charge all those draws. The big blind gets out of the way pretty fast, and the early position limper pretty much snap calls. I've played with him several times before, and he limps pretty much every suited hand. So any spade combo, any club combo, queen X, or every combo of 7-6 are all in his range. The pot has bloated to $430, and the river comes out the 3 of clubs, bringing in the backdoor flush and the obvious straight draw. He checks for a 3rd time, and now I have a decision. Do I just check back, bet small to target queen X, or jam all in and hope he hero calls thinking I missed a flush? I go with the second option and decide to do the same bet of $110. He looks annoyed with the situation, but quickly puts in the call. I show my hand, and it's good after our opponent flashes the queen of hearts. Maybe a jam on the river might have been the best play, but either way, I'm happy we're scooping in a big pot right off the bat after our horrific day 4 session. This next hand is the most interesting hand of the day. The $6 straddle is on, and under the gun opens to $23. The action gets folded to me on the button, and I look down at pocket queens. This is almost always a 3-bet, but the catch is that the under the gun player only has about $90 total, and the big blind and straddler are action players with little deeper stacks. So I'm not looking to play for $90, and I want to bring these guys along for the party, especially when I have position. So I decide to set the trap and just put in the call. As expected, both the big blind and straddler come along, so we're going 4 ways to a flop with $90 in the middle, and the board comes out 10-7-7 rainbow, giving ourselves an overpair. The big blind checks, and now the straddler takes matters into his own hands and leads out for $70. The under the gun player folds, and now I have a decision. He has about $170 behind, and I don't want to scare him off with the jam, plus I could maybe incentivize the big blind to come along, so I decide to just flat. The big blind player folds, and we go to a 5 of spades turn. The straddler just rips it all in, and I'm never folding against this guy, so I put in the chips, turn over my hand, and he shows 10-5 offsuit for technically 3 pair. The river comes out the 6 of spades, and we take down a massive pot. Our decision to slow play paid off in a nice way.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Unfortunately, we couldn't get anything going for the next couple of hours and gave back $400 of our winnings until we got to our last hand. The short stack opened to $15, the cutoff called, and I 3-bet pocket aces to $55 on the button. Both of them put in the call, and when the flop came out Queen 8-7 rainbow, I c-bet for $61, but they both folded. We get back $110 to end the day. So as for our day 5 session, we never had to add on to our stack, so we were into the game for $500 total and out for $956 for a nice $456 profit to end the week. For our final results for the week, we played poker 5 straight days and logged 18 hours total, which I wish we could have done more. We ended up with a nice solid profit of $614, which is an hourly win rate of $34 an hour. Even though this was a small sample size, I think it was good insight to see what it felt like to be a poker pro for the week. My brain is completely fried after playing for 5 straight days, and I couldn't even imagine having to doing that week in and week out. Playing that much kind of took the thrill and joy that I usually get from playing poker, which I never want to lose. With that being said, let's get to the only question that needs answering. Is it possible to be a poker pro at the 1-3 level?
Final answer? Yes.
My answer is yes. I do think it's possible to be a poker professional at the 1-3 level. You'll need to make sure your win rate is at least $25 an hour to sustain a half-decent lifestyle, which I've been able to accomplish in 2024 so far. But even though I do think it's possible, I would never try to do this myself or personally recommend someone else doing it full-time as their only source of income. The benefits of this career do not, I repeat, do not outweigh the cons. It comes with no health insurance, no retirement options, and worst of all, no guaranteed income. One stretch of bad play and bad variance can completely wipe you out, even at the 1-3 level. Now, if you want to go ahead and try to become a poker pro, I'm all for dream chasing, but just make sure you have these key staples if you want to attempt it. I asked local legend Doug McCusker, check out his channel if you haven't already, if he thinks it's possible to be a 1-3 poker pro. He said yes as well, and said that you'll need a deep bankroll for the inevitable swings, a strong grasp of the fundamentals, and find a game that you can beat and play in often. I think this is great advice for those who want to take the shot. As for bankroll recommendations, I think you need at least 30 of your max buy-ins set aside in a poker bankroll fund. Not only that, but I think having 6 to 12 months of bare-bone living expenses set aside in another savings account would benefit you tremendously. Variance will inevitably hit, so you never know how hard she's gonna punch, so always have a backup plan. That's all I have for you guys today. As always, I hope you rung it at the tables, and I'd appreciate it if you could hit the subscribe button to help me reach my year-end goal of 2,500 subscribers.